Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the videos of me building Panda. If you do, please give a thumbs up and a subscribe, it'll be pretty good luck for you and for me. I also wanted to give a small disclaimer that this process worked for me. It may not work out the same way for you, so just be aware of that you're doing this at your own risk. And make sure you're taking the safe precautions when you're doing this, because you're going to have a car on top of you, an engine on top of you, an engine dropping out, dropping in. So just please take care and, make sure you have added support and security around the car so that you're able to do all this work safely. I wanted to apologize about the video because it's not exactly the best quality. There's a lot of people walking around me and kids playing and everything, so it's very hard to record and work on the engine, have all my tools everywhere. So I decided to go and do a little voiceover to kind of explain everything that's going on. Here I'm just talking about how I removed the engine. I don't really have any footage on it, so I just kind of talk about it here to give you an idea of what's involved in a nutshell. I started off by lifting the car up and put it on jack stands, and I put a little extra security like the front wheels underneath it, so if anything happens the car will be landing on something besides my face. Next I started to remove all the things that were in my way, like the air intake box, battery tray, exhaust manifold, and the exhaust pipe, the middle section, because that's going to get in your way. I popped off the drive shafts at the CV joints. I didn't want to take out the actual inner CV joints of the gearbox because it's a bit more messier, and for some reason they just didn't want to pop out. So underneath the battery tray, you remove the 3 bolts holding the gear linkage. You pop off the gear cables off of the gearbox. And then if you plan on removing the AC, like I did, then make sure to have some kind of gas remover tool or some kind of person come around and take away the gas for you because, well, it's dangerous and it's not good to just let it out into the atmosphere. Then you finally disconnect the piping from the AC and the rest of the car. Otherwise, if you're keeping the AC pump, hang it somewhere with zip ties. This was what I did initially, but plans changed and whatnot, so it's kind of like up to you whether you want to remove the AC pump or not. If you do remove the AC pump, you can still keep it for later as the pulley for the accessory belt, or you can replace that whole mechanism with something like a 1.2 16 valve alternator and belt, which will have all the different tensioning mechanisms, but that's up to you and for you to do the research, because I never actually got those things. I just used my AC pump as a pulley for the accessory belt. I then removed all the different lines, such as the water cooling lines, the ECU plug that goes to the body loom on the car, reverse switch cable which is found underneath the battery tray on the gearbox. I removed the fuel lines from the manifold, the charcoal lines, that's the blue pipe that goes into the manifold. I removed that. And I think that's it from the top of my head. There's a couple of probably water lines around the place. You just remove them. There's nothing very difficult about that. I then brought around the engine crane and I supported the engine with some kind of straps I had lying around. They're really good strong straps. So I wrapped that around the engine, and the engine crane was able to support all of the weight. And next I started to undo the bolts that were holding the engine, and there's 3 different points. There's on the driver's side, which is next to the expansion tank for the radiator. So you remove the 3 nuts holding the engine there. You remove the single bolt that's holding onto the gearbox on the passenger side, which is under the battery tray. And the final bracket that's holding the engine is the torque mount, which can be found next to the exhaust pipe at the back of the engine under the car. You're better off removing the actual bracket that's holding it, that's connected on the gearbox, because that bracket can get in the way in so many ways. So just remove it. It's 3 bolts. So now the engine is pretty much free hanging on the engine crane. And what I did was I used a board with wheels on it, and I lowered the engine on that board, and then I was able to pull the engine from underneath the car. So right now I'm in the middle of swapping out a couple of things on the Bravo TJet engine from the Panda. Water pump, timing belt, a couple of those little niggly bits because they are fresh on my Panda engine, but on the Bravo engine they're quite meldy. So I'm in the process of swapping them around. Like some fresh water pump, the timing belt from the Panda, it's all the same. Even the timing belt tensioner, that's all I am contemplating keeping this engine for a future project, maybe like a Fiat Cinquecento or a Sessento. So 100 horsepower. I still have the ECU bolted on top of there. So I swapped out the intake here. I'm in the process of removing the dual mass flywheel and clutch and pressure plate. And then I'm going to be using my timing kit. And then I'm going to be using my timing kit. So this is the timing kit for the Panda, but it works on TJet engines as well. It's pretty much exactly the same thing. These are the bits that hold in the timing on the cams. This is your crank that keeps in the timing on the crank. And then you have your top dead center. I don't even know what they are, little poles. You can stop the gearbox from, or the flywheel from moving by using this little tool here. Yeah, and it's very good. It cost me probably around 40 euros or something altogether on Amazon. I'll link it down below so you have this to get if you need to as well. So just to give you an idea of how the timing tool works, there's a little bung here where there's you take that off with an Allen key. You get the engine timed in. This should go slot right in. So if I just show you an example, don't worry, it's all locked in. So see the way there's like little two flat surfaces. Slide that in. It should move all the way in. If it doesn't normally move it all the way in, it should stick out like this. But if you have it aligned properly, it should go in like that. You twist this collar in, and now that's the head locked. You do have it on the other side as well, but I think it's mainly if you're like taking the whole head apart, so you can keep it in timed properly. And the other part to timing the engine, this key here like this, you bolt it in. If the other tool doesn't slot in and this is in place, you have to spin this around another time. Then the other key should slot into the head for the cams, and then this you tighten down, and that's your engine timed. So this cam can't move anywhere once you take the timing belt off. So here I've just removed this gross looking tensioner. I'm going to change the water pump as well because the Panda's one was pretty much brand new. I've swapped out the water pump now. It's all shiny and everything. Cleaned up all the old goop off of the surface with a Stanley blade. As you can tell, the timing tool is still here on the head and on the crank to stop it from moving around. So how you put on the belt first is you start from the bottom and keeping tension on it, maybe a finger or maybe putting something here to stop it from slipping. You pull the belt all the way up over the water pump, wheel, cog, whatever you want to call it, and then you have to pull it across on top, or across, pull it all the way up to the camshaft wheel, keeping the tension all the way along here, otherwise it won't be properly tensioned. And then once you get it around here, you wrap it around the tensioner, and then there's a couple of ways of doing this. I have this special tool that has these little teeth on it, and you slot them in here into these holes, and you pull it all the way across until you see this little thing moves across, wheel all the way across until this part touches this edge here. Once you do that, you tighten up the nut, and that's your whole belt tensioned and timed properly. A little FYI if anybody's going to be doing a similar swap. The flywheel from the 1.4 Panda engine has smaller holes for the bolts, the Torx bolts. TJet Bravo engine, the flywheel in general is bigger diameter. I guess it's to kind of like cope with all that power of 150 horsepower, although I'm pretty sure these are rated for a decent amount of power anyway. So I'm not too concerned about clutch spin and stuff like that. But this means that I need to get these holes bored out a little bit more so the Torx bolts can fit in there nicely. So I'm going to try and drill them out. So here I've actually managed to get the flywheel onto the engine. Now something to note here is that the bolts that come from the TJet engine, which are, you know, bigger than the Panda engine, they need to be cut down to length of the Panda's flywheel bolts. The reason being is that they're very long because of the fact that the dual mass flywheel is very thick. So if you don't cut them, those bolts are going to be pressed against the engine, and if you turn the car over with those bolts, you're running the risk of destroying your whole engine, so make sure you cut them down the side. It's gotten dark now and I've packed it all up. Did a lot today. I managed to get the gearbox on, the Panda gearbox. The only problem is that the two lower bolts are bigger size on the TJet sump, so they're not connecting there to the engine, the gearbox. So next up I started to talk about the fuel pump. So I actually had a Fiat Bravo fuel pump, but that doesn't work. The reason being is the float that indicates how much fuel you have in the fuel tank doesn't quite fit into the correct position of the fuel pump, because the fuel pump has to be orientated in a certain way. So I ended up buying a Abarth 500 fuel pump. Reason being is that they have the Abarth 500 and the Panda have a very similar fuel tank, and so when I actually fit that in, it worked perfect. It got it into the correct position, and yeah, that works perfectly in the with that fuel pump. And I also got the retainer ring to hold it in place, and the fuel lines to and from the center unit. So right now what I'm working on is getting this into place. So you can see there's two pipes. One is the input, one is the output of the fuel center unit, and right now I'm just trying to aim the retainer ring to put it into place because it's a bit of a faff. Once I have that done, I think I might have to drop the tank so I can run the to and from lines, and then I'll be able to get the fuel lines all sorted out for the return, and it'll be a bit more OEM, shall we say, because it's Fiat Abarth lines. So that's the work so far. So here I'm showing the return line that I made from copper pipe. It runs all the way along the firewall, down by the master cylinder and underneath the chassis of the car, along how the original fuel line runs. Now, it's not like 100% connected to everything in all the correct places to hold it, but it holds very well. And it connects at the bottom of the rear axle, and there it connects to the hard lines that go to the fuel pump. So that's kind of it for this video. I talked about how I removed the engine, how I prepped the new engine in, and got the fuel line sorted out. I know I didn't show a lot of it, but like I said, it's kind of difficult to do that when I have all my tools around the place, kids running and screaming and blah 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 blah. So next video will be more so with how the engine is in the car. Again, don't show you how that's been put in, but basically everything I did to get old engine out is the same process of getting it in, but in reverse. So make sure you're very careful with the flywheel bolts, because it's a very big deal. I didn't realize that until I tried to actually turn the car over. No, I didn't. A ratchet, and I tried to turn the engine manually by hand, and then I saw that the engine wasn't turning at all. So then I realized, I watched a video, which I will actually link here, of a guy who's doing a Fiat 600 or 500, I can't remember which one, but he's doing a TJet swap into his car as well, and he said that, and that for some reason stuck in my head, and I knew straight away when the engine didn't turn that was the reason. So, you know, be careful. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon on the next episode, where we actually have the Panda with the new engine. Bye!